In part 3 of our recap of the entire Mortal Kombat series, we left things off with the climax of the 5th mainline installment, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, which ends with nearly all of the heroes of the franchise meeting grisly fates when they're killed at the hands of Shang, Tsung, and Quan, with Raiden left as the only one still standing and fighting against them. The next game in the series, Mortal Kombat Deception, picks up pretty much exactly where its predecessor ends. But before we dive back into the story at hand, it's important to first turn back the clock and set up some other important information that will come into play going forward. One character in particular that proves to be central to Mortal Kombat Deception's story, Shujinko, whose story actually begins long before the events of the series proper. Decades ago, in fact, while Shao Kahn's rule was thriving and at the peak of its powers at this point in time, the former Outworld Emperor Dragon King Onaga was seething in his centuries-long imprisonment of death, orchestrated by the treachery of Shao Kahn, who turned on him and killing him. Driven by vengeance and his lingering ambitions of conquest, Onaga started putting his plans in place, hoping to one day return to the world of the living by assimilating what was left of his soul with the physical form of someone else, and taking control of their body. After that, he meant to continue his conquest of all the realms and reshape them as he saw fit. And to do that, he knew he would need the power of something known as the Kamidogu Relics. As we covered in part 1 of our series recap, they were 6 relics, ancient and all-powerful weapons. The relics were then scattered throughout the realms, but being fully aware of their power to make and unmake reality itself, Onaga knew that if he could get his hands on all of them together, he would be able to reshape all the realms in his own image, and so he set his eyes on the aforementioned Shujinko, who, at this point, was a young and promising warrior on Earthrealm. Appearing to Shujinko as Damashi, Onaga tricked the warrior into carrying out his mission for him. Onaga told him to find and gather the 6 relics and bring them to the Nexus, a unique realm that existed between realms, and said that this would allow the champion to be able to travel between realms more easily. In exchange, Onaga gave Shujinko the ability to absorb the knowledge and fighting skills of whomever he wished, and with this gift, Shujinko set off on his quest. But traveling to 6 different realms and tracking down the ancient, powerful relics took quite some time, as you would imagine. Decades passed, and around the same time that Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance's events were taking place, and Shang Tsung and Quan had managed to revive the Dragon King's undead mummified army, Shujinko finally completed his mission. After getting his hands on the 6th and final relic in Edenia, he traveled to the Nexus, though it wouldn't be long before he would realize just what he had unwittingly been involved in and made possible almost single-handedly, because this was where Onaga returned. Before we get to that, however, let's pause and go back once again, this time all the way back to when Onaga was still the ruler of Outworld and Shao Kahn was still his loyal servant. At this time, with his warring empire at the peak of its powers, Onaga devised a plan that would allow him to effectively become immortal. Using the powerful magic of his followers, Onaga cast a spell on a dragon egg, and not just any dragon egg, but the egg of a dragon from the very first generation of the species. And what exactly did the spell do? Well, it essentially transferred his soul into the embryo inside the egg, so that Onaga would be reborn in the body of an elder dragon when the egg hatched millions of years later. The long time afterward, during the events of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, due to a tangled web of events, it just so happened that when the egg hatched, the ever-so-unfortunate reptile was there. Onaga grabbed this opportunity with both hands and assimilated his tiny dragon body with that of reptile, thus being fully reborn in full physical form, ready to be able to step out into the world again and resume his bloody conquest. And so it was that when Shujinko brought all 6 relics together at the Nexus, Onaga arrived at the scene and revealed to him the true nature of his decades-long quest, and how he had been manipulated into helping the Dragon King come achieve his goals. Taking all 6 relics for himself, Onaga declared that all he needed now was the power contained within Shinnok's amulet, which is in Quan Chi's possession at this point in time, and that using its powers in conjunction with the powers of the relics would finally allow him to take control of and reshape all of the realms however he saw fit. Feeling betrayed and horrified at what he had unwittingly been involved in for most of his life, Shujinko escaped, traveling back to Earthrealm, vowing to defeat Onaga. And now we finally arrive at the events of Mortal Kombat Deception, which, as you may have guessed, sees the Dragon King starring as the main villain. But what of Quan and Tsung, may you ask, especially after all the havoc their deadly alliance unleashed on all of the realms and their inhabitants? Well, let's get to that, shall we? As MK Deception kicks off, Raiden stands alone against Quan and Tsung, who have killed almost all of those who have stood against them. But even though they are victorious, that victory proves to be short-lived. Almost instantly, the two of them turn on each other and start fighting over the ownership of Shinnok's amulet, since whoever has the amulet has the ability to control the Dragon King's revived army. In the fight that follows, Quan emerges as the victor, but almost as if on cue, Onaga arrives on the scene. Momentarily, Quan Tsung, and Raiden forget all of the enmity they have between each other, and realizing that Onaga is a far bigger threat, they band together to fight against him. All of their efforts prove useless, however, and it's not long before they realize that the Dragon King is too powerful for all of them, even with all of their powers combined. In a desperate last-ditch attempt to destroy Onaga, at this point, Raiden summons every last shred of his powers and releases them in a single nuclear-level explosion. As you might imagine, that destroys everything in the vicinity and kills Raiden himself, Quan and Tsung. Onaga, however, emerges unscathed, and now also holds Shinnok's amulet in his possession. Meanwhile, though Raiden has very much disintegrated, he isn't completely dead. His lingering essence finds its way back to Earthrealm, where it's able to regather and revive him, though not without some drastic changes. Corrupted by his encounter with the Dragon King and tainted by his evil magic, Raiden is revived as Dark Raiden, which is exactly what it sounds like, a darker, more ruthless version of Raiden, who has now quickly come to despise the inhabitants of Earthrealm, how they take his protection for granted, and how little they do to protect their own realm. In his new form, Raiden now swears to protect Earthrealm by any means necessary, even if he has to do it against people he once considered his allies, regardless of who he has to kill and how many people he has to kill. To aid him in his efforts, Raiden also revives Liu Kang, though he too comes back not exactly himself. The Liu Kang that returns is no longer the noble warrior he was in life, but a mindless undead servant bound to Raiden's will. Ultimately, however, it's Shujinko, not Raiden or Liu Kang, who turns out to be the one to defeat the Dragon King. While Onaga was rallying his supporters on Outworld and searches for a way that would allow him to fuse all 6 relics together, Shujinko was working towards his own goals as well. In his final fight against Onaga, he uses the very powers that the Dragon King had once granted to him, absorbing the combined fighting powers of a number of warriors, many of whom were new introductions in Mortal Kombat Deception, including Kira and Cobra, who are new Black Dragon recruits, Darius, a resistance leader who's fighting against Onaga's forces, and Dairu, a mercenary from Order Realm, which is where Darius is from as well. Absorbing all of their powers, Shujinko's own abilities expand massively, more than even the Dragon King himself could have anticipated. And with these abilities at his disposal, Shujinko shatters all 6 relics, and since the relics were what made Onaga invincible, that leaves him vulnerable as well. Shujinko strikes a final blow, which quite literally blows Onaga's soul out of Reptile's body, freeing the Saurian from his control. Meanwhile, the Dragon King's soul winds up in Netherrealm, where it is sealed once again, this time by Nightwolf. That wraps up the story of Mortal Kombat Deception, and brings us to the events of its successor, Mortal Kombat Armageddon, which is also the final game in the series' original timeline. Before we get to its story, however, we need to jump back in time again. This time we turn our attention to the realm of Edenia, and a couple of key characters in particular. Argus from Edenia, his wife, the sorceress Delia, and their sons, Taven and Daegon. Of particular interest to us here is Delia, who, thanks to the power of foresight, was able to see with absolute certainty something that had a very real chance of coming to pass in the distant future. Some time after Onaga was originally betrayed and poisoned by Shao Kahn, Delia had a vision of a distant apocalyptic event, Armageddon itself, which she predicted would happen due to the combatants of all the realms becoming so powerful that they would eventually tear the fabric of reality apart. As a way to prevent this cataclysm of all the realms and everything in them, Delia and Argus came up with a plan. Delia foresaw that the fateful final battle at the end of everything would take place in a crater on Edenia, so at this very spot, Argus built a massive underground pyramid within which he and Delia stored the Blaze, a slumbering file elemental created by the sorceress, who would have unimaginable power and would be the means to prevent Armageddon. Elsewhere, however, Delia and Argus disagreed on how best to deal with the warriors in the future who would threaten all of existence. Delia, knowing that many of them would be good people with noble intentions, wanted to take a lenient approach and essentially strip every single one of the combatants of all of their powers. Argus, on the other hand, wanted to take no risks and thought simply wiping them out of existence in one fell swoop would be the best way forward. Ultimately, the husband and wife decided that they would let their children decide. And how exactly would that work? Taven and Daegon were both put into a deep slumber, to be awoken only when the time for Armageddon was finally at hand. Upon being awakened, both brothers would be tasked with defeating Blaze, and the one to claim victory would become Edenia's new protector. In addition to that, both also had to retrieve a special sword and piece of armor, each with one of them belonging originally to Argus and Delia. If the brother with Delia's equipment defeated Blaze, all of the realm's combatants would be stripped of their powers in order to prevent the destruction of everything, but would still be allowed to keep their lives. However, if one with Argus's gear did the same, all of the combatants would be killed. Both Taven and Daegon were to be woken via a signal from Blaze when Armageddon was at hand. However, Daegon was accidentally woken up much earlier than that, at which point Shinnok was able to manipulate him and turn him to the dark side, so to speak, by identifying Daegon's resentment and jealousy towards his brother as one of his weaknesses. Daegon was then guided into stealing the powerful weapons of his parents and using them to kill Argus and Delia. When Taven would be awoken a long time afterward, at the correct time, unlike his brother, Daegon would be too far gone, and had become completely obsessed with killing Blaze so he could take his power for himself. And now finally we arrive at the events of Mortal Kombat Armageddon itself. In the wake of the events of the previous game, some pretty formidable villains have now lost against the series' heroes, from Tsung and Shao Kahn to Quan and Onaga. However, in MK Armageddon, all of them are brought together under a single banner by Shinnok, with all of them becoming aware of the fact that whoever defeats Blaze will also be granted the Elemental's powers. The villains combine to make the forces of darkness, all working towards a common selfish goal, and are also joined by many other characters from throughout the series, including Scorpion, Daegon, Baraka, Kintaro, Frost, Rain, Kano, Goro, Darius, Melina, Reptile, Sector, and many others. The forces of darkness are not unchallenged in their efforts, of course, and to stand against them, the forces of light emerge as well, with their goal being to defeat Blaze and then use his powers for the betterment of all realms, rather than serving selfish and chaotic purposes. The forces of light also include heroes from throughout the Mortal Kombat series, including Liu Kang, Raiden, Johnny Cage, Jax, Sonya, Sub-Zero, Kitana, Cyrax, Nightwolf, Shujinko, Taven, and many more. True to what Delia saw in her visions long ago, the final battle of Armageddon does indeed end up taking place in the Edenian crater, where the forces of darkness and light clash against each other in an epic battle. A duel between Taven and Daegon happens at the base of the pyramid atop which Blaze rests, and Taven ultimately emerges victorious, which of course means that according to what his parents had planned, he is now destined to climb the pyramid, defeat Blaze, and claim his powers. All combatants on both sides of the conflict start climbing up the pyramid, hoping to be the first to reach the top and claim Blaze's powers. But as fate would have it, the victor isn't anyone Delia and Argus could have predicted all that time ago. Daegon has already been defeated, but Taven doesn't defeat Blaze either. In the end, it's Shao Kahn, the Mortal Kombat franchise's oldest and probably most popular main villain, who claims that prize. With the victory he claims, Shao Kahn wreaks absolute havoc, killing pretty much everybody. All warriors in the forces of darkness and light are killed, and the last one left standing is, once again, Raiden. He's only able to do one seemingly small thing before he too is killed, though that seemingly minuscule action changes the course of, well, everything. Using an amulet, Raiden sends a message back into time, to a past version of his own self. The message simply says, he must win. Mortal Kombat Armageddon's story ends with Shao Kahn's ultimate victory, the death of pretty much every other character in the entire series, and the fulfillment of all of Delia's visions of the apocalypse. Where does the story go from here? What purpose does Raiden's message serve? How is there any coming back from any of this? The franchise answers all of those questions with one very simple word: reboot. But we'll talk more about that when we return for part 5 of our complete Mortal Kombat recap. where we'll discuss the events of the series' 9th mainline installment, 2011's Mortal Kombat, which reboots the franchise and starts its own continuity. And that brings us to the end of the video. A quick request: we upload new videos every single day, and if you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing. It really helps us out. Also, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon so that you can receive daily video updates. Thanks for watching.